All right, welcome to Halitics, Arlen. I'm just glad I just barely snuck in there. I had to post this on the Halitics Facebook page, and that's always a little bit of a challenge. Gets me a little bit nervous. It's not seamless. How are you today?
I'm doing quite well. For a couple of reasons. For one thing, I think things are getting better politically. I think there's obviously Trump is in a little bit of trouble. Looking at all the polls, people are kind of not feeling like he's doing the job he promised he would do. Then personally, I'll be going Friday. Nancy will be heading back east to Vermont. She'll be driving back, and I will go with her for the first leg of the trip, which would be Mount Shasta and then Ashland, Oregon, to see the famous Shakespeare Festival up there. And then after that, she will keep going on to Vermont, and I will fly back to Monterey.
All right, well, that sounds very nice, Arlen. And your optimism, I hope, is infectious. I have not been feeling particularly good about the way things are going, but maybe you're right. I hope you are. You are the thought leader, and the California thought leader, but now I guess Vermont thought leader soon enough.
Well, not till July, Hal.
Are we going to have to go back to change our times? Because I was thinking, since I've got you at 2, I just as soon keep you to my time, but that may not be ideal for you if you want to get your day going once you're in the Green Mountain State.
Once I get there, anytime we can work that out. That's fine. Your time is good. We did it last year.
Okay, because, I might want to keep it. Well, we'll work that. We don't have to talk about it now. So there's the thumbnail I put together. Can we stanch the wounds? And you can see the country kind of broke right down the middle there. I actually debated how to best present it. I'm not sure I did a good job, but I think it's clear. And you seem to think we can, right? We can. Well, stanching just means we stop the bleeding, basically. We stop the gushing blood that our nation is right now, pushing out. You think we can stanch it? You think we can, and then ultimately heal the injuries that Trump and other presidents and other leaders have inflicted on us?
Well, everything's very uncertain now, Hal. I don't know which way things are going, but at least Trump has been wounded, I think, in a lot of ways. The polls certainly show it. I've been following his approval ratings all year, and he was up for a while, but then he started gradually going down, and now he's quite a bit down in the disapproval area. So that makes me happy because people are saying he can't do all the things he claims he can do.
Do you think, Arlen, and I don't disagree that his approval ratings obviously I can read, I can see that they're tanking. Democrats apparently are still in the toilet as well. And that really brings me to the question I asked yesterday. I asked you today's question, which is, and I hope we will address it. Can we stanch the wounds? Can we bring our country back? Can we make things a little bit better? And for me, that means addressing the poverty, homelessness, war, environmental collapse. We need to address those existential problems. And I asked this question yesterday. We stand for nothing, vote for us anyway. Your solution, at least, I know it's not your entire solution, but you're certainly to stop the bleeding, you would argue, I know, that we must elect the Democrats in power. Is that a fair critique of them that I discussed yesterday? And if it is true, can they win standing on nothing?
I hear a lot about, what's going on with the Democrats. How come they're not doing anything? And I think the Democrats are still trying to figure out what they could do best that'll help, get their popularity up. And it's tough to figure out at this point. But I think, the governor of Illinois was very right on. I think people paid a lot of attention to what he was saying. And that is the Democrats have to really go forward and with action, with, really doing things and protesting and, making a bigger deal out of everything rather than just sitting back and waiting for Trump to fall apart.
Well, that's the view that David Hogg, one of the vice chairs of the Democratic National Committee, is taking as well, which is we can't have do-nothing Democrats. We need people like Senator Booker who will have 25-hour filibusters. We need Bernie and AOC to go around and tour the country. But what I've heard as a criticism, even from pretty far lefties who I presume like AOC and Bernie, is that they're not really calling for anything in particular. They're not presenting a vision. They're not standing for a particular set of policies. If you listened to to Pritzker, J.B. Pritzker, and I looked through his speech closely, I read it closely, he doesn't call for a specific set of policies, and neither does David Hogg. He does say he wants to primary what he calls do-nothing older Democrats, but policy is not the reason for primarying them, according to him. It's that they don't stand up to Trump, whatever that means, and they are too passive, more generally, and they're old, also being old. So I get back to my question: do the Democrats need a defined set of issues that they run on, specific policies that they say this is what it means to be a Democrat? And I'll give you an example. Today I was on the Hill, I mentioned this to you, at a Medicare for All, a bill drop. Less than half the Congress has endorsed it or supports it. Only about 12 Democratic senators do, less than half the Democrats in the House. Is that the kind of bill that you want to see Democrats full-throated support? And do you want to see a list of legislation that they say, if you elect us, we will pass, or we will try to pass these bills and pursue these policies?
Yeah, I think that is important and necessary. The problem so far, they've been just kind of hanging back and not really taking on Trump as hard as they can. They're unsure of themselves. That it's been bad, and they're. Oh, by the way, one other thing: David Hogg is no longer the vice chairman of the Democratic Party. They kind of forced him out because he was going against incumbents.
So how do you feel about that? Let me just quickly, I know you don't like it sometimes when I interrupt you, and I really work on this, but I want your take. I want Arlen Grossman feels this way about the ouster of David Hogg.
Well, I really like David Hogg. I like what he says, and whether he's, vice chairman or not, he's still going to be there and still giving his opinion and still working for the Democrats. So I'm not worried about that in particular. But I think the important thing is the Democrats really have to come on strong on issues that they're not. They've been too incrementalist, too, not willing to go far enough, and maybe they need to go far enough and be very strong about, especially taking on some of the corporatist elite, the billionaires, which is, of course, difficult to do because, they've got so much money and so much power. You probably heard about what Bezos did with Amazon. I don't know if you did or not.
I'm not sure what you're referring to.
Well, he was going to do something where he would put the price and the tax of what people are buying, and also, how the tariffs affect things, something along that line. And then, I guess he got some pressure from Trump and he dropped his idea, which is what they've been doing all along, is pretty much giving in to Trump. So,
yeah, I mean, Bezos doesn't like tariffs. He's made a gazillion dollars in part by, sourcing his online retail outlet with cheap crap from China. So obviously he doesn't like the idea that suddenly prices for that cheap crap will go up. That would reduce his profits. So I can understand why he would try to demonize tariffs, and I also understand his desire to placate the bully in the White House. I don't think either inclination redounds to his in his favor. But I'm going to pressure you on this, Arlen, because you're saying Democrats do need to take a more assertive position. They do need to stand up to the corporatists in their party, and they do need to maybe present a more progressive face. Doesn't the ouster of David Hogg suggest that they're prepared to do none of that?
Like I said, he's not going to disappear. He may not have that particular official role, but he's still going to be talking. He's still going to be speaking and giving his point of view. So I'm not worried about. But I think the general thing that he's saying, and a lot of Democrats are saying, is we can't do what we did the last time. We got beaten very badly in the election, so we need to come on a lot stronger and take positions that we were a little bit weak on, and really, go and protest and do more activities, like sit-ins and things like that will get people's attention and show that the Democrats really do want to do something significant.
Arlen has teed up some great stories for us to discuss. Before we do, including one that's featured front and center on the Big Picture Report, which is, of course, where he blogs. Before we do that, I always center Gaza, Palestine. The tragedy continues. The genocide continues there. This is from the Iranian news service Mehr. 50 Palestinians killed in Israeli attacks in Gaza. And that's, April 29th. For a second, I looked at that and said, wait, is that April? My eyes are so bad, Arlen. I knew it was today's date. I got it right. But I thought, does that say Aug? And then I'm like, wait, it couldn't be. Is it August 29, 24? Because it could be 25 because that hasn't happened yet unless we have tomorrow's. Then if it was August 29th, I have to look at the horse race results and then go put my bets down. All right, 50 Palestinians. I shouldn't crack wise. This is a horrible story, but at some point you're like, oh my God, it just numbs you. So much killing by Israel day after day, week after week, month after month, year after year. It just doesn't continue. It just continues. And it doesn't matter who's in the White House. So I just want to flag that 50, and you can look at the absolute devastation on the ground there in Gaza, tiny area. Amnesty International says that this is a live streamed genocide, Arlen, and I know people have recoiled against that term. I think you've, I believe, come to accept it. Do you think, though, that it's, because I've used that term for years, is that, I think the truth is what matters. This is, to me, unquestionably a genocide. That said, it does turn people off. They just say, I'm not going to listen to you if you're going to call it a genocide.
Yeah, the words are not so important as what's actually happening. And actually, the media and Trump and every politician has been ignoring Israel and Gaza. I haven't heard it mentioned in the last week or so, which is a shame because the brutality and all the killing keeps going on. And there's nobody around to say, no, stop, we got to do something about it, because Trump's not going to do it. And he's the one with the power.
Wouldn't you think, Arlen, again, I'm going to cut you off for a sec, but on this topic, so we're going to follow up with your point. Would you have thought, let me put it differently, after Trump took office, he seemed to push for a ceasefire. There was a ceasefire. It seemed to be better news for Gazans, or at least, yes, better news for Gazans. Now it's exploded again. The killing rates have gone, if anything, up since that ceasefire ended compared to when Harris Biden were in power. Wouldn't you think that maybe the so-called liberal media would take note of this? And yet, as you point out, we're not hearing anything about it.
Yeah, I don't think it's an important issue among many Democrats. Trump just, talks about, let's have some peace, but he doesn't do anything to make it happen. And I think people are just ignoring the whole issue because there's not a big lot of difference between the Democrats and the Trump administration. They're not pushing back on Netanyahu, and they should be.
Let me ask you about one of the hosts that you do watch. I don't know how religiously, but I know Hartman is one of your go-tos. Has he, and I don't know, this is not a rhetorical question. I don't know the answer. Does he talk about, I haven't heard him talk about it, but I rarely check out his program. Does this come up on his 3-hour daily show when you've seen it?
Well, honestly, like we've talked about this, Al, I go from person to person, show to show. So I lately I haven't been. Oh,
you haven't? I see. I know you said that about Stephanie Miller, but I thought you were, and I misheard. I thought you had suggested you still do check out Hartman relatively, with some degree of regularity. Let me put it that way.
Well, some degree, but not enough to know what he thinks about on Gaza lately. So sorry.
I think he should. I think if you check him out on a relatively frequent basis, you should hear him mention it. I agree with you. It sounds like then he isn't talking about it that frequently if you're not hearing it come up.
Like I say, nobody really is, because there's just not
Well, come on, somebody is.
Well,
Amnesty International is.
yeah, no, you're right. But as far as the mainstream media and the politicians, not so much, and that's too bad because it's the horror keeps going on and doesn't seem to be it's not going to be stopping anytime soon, from what we can tell.
No question about that. It's so awful. There's tragically no end in sight except for the chambers, I guess, the death for the people of Gaza. I have a new number here, 52,365. They keep revising it upward, even including the most recent deaths because of the exhumations from rubble, where they're finding more bodies. And they, the Ministry of Health there updated the number by about 700 additional dead earlier over the weekend, and now they've revised it upward yet again. So we now have 52,365. And again, that number is considered conservative by many observers, many who have been on the ground. And just to give Trump his due as well, from March 18th through the 27th now, actually I should change that to the 28th. I always have trouble with that one. So that's through the 28th. Trump and Netanyahu have killed over 2273, or 22, about that number. And that includes at least 50 people Monday and well over 1,000 or more children. So just terrible. Just absolutely terrible.
Just tragic.
Arlen, we're going to talk about, before I start bashing Democrats, I want to give credit to one of your faves. And I think he is a fave. I better not say it's Tom Hartman after I realize you've basically...
I like Tom. I like Tom.
You've deprecated him slightly. Let's put it that way.
There's so many other people out there. That's all.
So this is a guy we are going to feature. His latest post, I think it's his latest. Your latest post is by Robert Reich. And I looked him up because I was going to say, hey, where is he on this genocide? And to be fair to Reich and to give him quite a bit of credit, this is not the only time either. This is one piece he posted at Substack, which is where he distributes his writings, but was picked up by Eurasia Review, and how Biden can stop Netanyahu. And he's very critical of Biden, calling him complicit and saying he's making the United States complicit in the murders there. He uses the term bloodbath. So I think, to me, he gets a little added frisson of credibility, does Reich, for doing that.
He's very active. He's always writing something. He's usually always right, like about Gaza and Netanyahu and all that, and just about how the Trump administration is doing. I tend to agree with him almost every time, and he's very prolific, and I respect him a lot.
Yeah, I mean, I certainly do give him credit. I think it took some real guts for a guy who is pretty closely associated with the Democrat Party. Yes, he's been a gadfly. Yes, he's been critical of the Democrats, but he's reviewed as a true Dem, to say that by continuing to supply aid, Biden is making us complicit in the bloodbath itself. He doesn't call it a genocide. I do. But I have a problem with that, which I'll get into a little bit later, but I just want to billboard it. Yes, he recognizes the crime, but then he doesn't refuse to support Harris for president. To me, I don't understand that, Arlen. To me, there's a disconnect somehow.
Well, anyway, forget Harris. She's gone. That election's over with. But he's looking ahead, and I think he sees things probably the way that I do, and maybe you do also.
All right, we'll get to his piece, but here's what he says. Here's how he explains it. Unlike Trump, Harris supports policies that will make our lives better. So it's the Trump sucks, but it's not just that Trump sucks. Harris is actually good. And I think that's where he loses me completely. We don't have to get into that at this moment. I know you don't want to, but I just want to make the point why I don't have as much reverence or respect that in the end for Robert Reich, recognizing he is extremely intelligent, incisive, a keen observer, and very, very good writer.
Can I ask you something, Hal?
Yes.
Can you see the difference between Trump and the MAGA people and the Democrats, even Kamala Harris, you know, Trump has been just an absolute horror. I mean, he's just been very extreme and ruining so much now. And the Democrats would not have done that. I mean, they wouldn't have done enough, but they wouldn't have ruined so much of the country like Trump is doing right now with Elon Musk and everybody else.
I guess we just ultimately disagree. I would say yes, probably. If there's 9 circles of hell, Trump is in the 9th, and then Harris would be in the 8th. So I'll give you that much. But I'm very clear what I think the greatest threats that we face as a nation and a world are. I've been clear over and over, and I always, it was until the genocide began by Israel. It was the climate collapse, the ecocide, and now I put that as 1A, and I put 1. The genocide, because we're fully behind it. And Harris was as bad on both, or almost as bad on both. She repeatedly said she would never hold the arms up to Israel. We know now from the ambassador to Israel, I have a quote, which I'll show you in a little bit if you want, but there was no effort whatsoever to rein Israel in. There wouldn't be now if she were president. And when it comes to the ecocide, she was for fracking. At no point did she ever talk about any changes to policy or reducing our consumption of fossil fuels or the production of fossil fuels. So those are the 2 biggest threats we face. She's as bad as Trump. She was worse on Ukraine.
Tough position. And I think she chose the wrong way to go. She decided to be supportive of Biden and the establishment, and she should have, showed her differences between her and Biden, but she didn't. And that's one of the reasons the Democrats lost. She just too much for the establishment, and the Democrats, the things that you're talking about really have to be spoken of in a loud voice and with action by the Democratic Party. And if they can find a way to do that, maybe there's still hope.
Well, let me ask you this, and I'm not trying to put you on the spot, but the way you phrased that response to me, it sounds to me like you believe that Harris really was or is against the Israeli murders in Gaza, the mass murder, the massacres. Why do you believe that? I mean, seriously, what evidence do you have that Kamala Harris actually has any human concerns for those people?
Well, to be honest, I don't know what she really thinks. She's been vice president for the last 4 years of Biden's term, and therefore couldn't come up with her own points of view. So I'm not sure what she really thinks deep down, and we'll never be able to find out. But by losing, she's unleashed, a real horror in Donald Trump, and his people are pretty much decimating the country in so many ways.
Let me say one other point on this, because I don't disagree. I think it's awful what Trump is doing. I'm horrified. I'm aghast. I think the first 4 that Reich lists are disappointing. I think in that I don't think they're as bad as the last 6. I think are much worse. I think he actually went in the wrong order. He should have started, if anything, with the abuse of immigrants, and he certainly actually should have started with Israel, Gaza, and the climate catastrophe. In fact, he's cut the budget or completely eliminated reports on the environment. I don't have that story here, but I was going to talk about it. So I think that's where Rice should have focused, but I think he's also talking about incompetence. But regardless, he uses a lot of words to describe Trump. Yes, I think Trump is absolutely horrible. He is more fascistic, in my opinion, than Harris would be. But I think there's a danger for people like me, and maybe you, I know to a degree your situation, but others. I think there's a danger to us who are affluent or at least secure economically to be too harshly critical of Trump vis-a-vis Harris, and to talk so confidently about how terrible Trump's policies are and how harmful and destructive they are to the country without recognizing just how badly democratic neoliberal policies destroyed lives, how many lives they destroyed. People in the heartland who worked in factories, who had decent middle class manufacturing jobs, their lives have been ruined by the free trade deals, which admittedly both parties pursued, but their lives have been destroyed. The endless wars that Democrats are as complicit in, or almost as complicit as Republicans, have also destroyed many, many lives. So I think there's a danger for us to say, well, look how bad Trump is. Look at these terrible things he's doing to immigrants, without acknowledging just how badly Clinton, Obama, and Biden policies, how much harm they did.
Well, I think people do understand that, because if you look at the polls, how many, the people that respect the Democratic Party or think that they're going to, be that much helpful, they're very low. I mean, the Democrats don't have much in the way of approval rating, and because of what you're talking about. They've pretty much been kind of, just laid back and not really making any big changes when the country really needed big changes, because people are really hurting and continue to be really hurting. So, I think the Democrats have a long road ahead of them.
All right, you're watching Halitics. We've got California thought leader Arlen Grossman with us, soon to be Vermont thought leader, although really he is just thought leader Grossman. And I mean that with, of course, it's a little tongue-in-cheek, but Arlen, you absolutely make me think, and you have a lot of insights that I appreciate your sharing on this program. And let me just give you one other sort of a compliment, and it's partly because you come on the show, so I appreciate that. But it's also true. I was down the hill. I was for this Medicare for All launch event. Bernie was there, Pramila Jayapal, some others, or National Nurses United was the big populator of the event. Most of the folks there were wearing red National Nurses United shirts. I assume they got their rank and file out. And I talked to some of the people there, PDA representatives, National Nurses United representatives, and they really pissed me off. I have to say, I was really irritated. I've seen this movie before, and it always ends badly. We don't get Medicare for all. It's less likely to happen now. And I just, to me, this is a perfect example of why we need to go try a different plan. And the folks there will not even entertain that option. They get angry when it's pointed out to them. And I think a big part of it is, I mentioned privilege, I mentioned affluence. A lot of these organizers, they have good jobs. They have good middle-class jobs. They may have pensions. And it's not that hard. It's not that unpleasant to be a union rep, or to be, an executive of a progressive movement organization. Those jobs are pretty good, actually, in a lot of ways. So these folks are like, oh yeah, this is going well, we're going to do it. Don't throw rain on our parade. But that parade is a parade that works for them, but not for very many other people. And it pisses me off. But you don't irritate me that way.
Yeah, I know. By the way, thanks for the kind words. And, the problem right now is that, one thing the Democrats certainly have to do is stand up for working people, for unions. That's a big one. I think they should, really go full force offensive on that. And also, there's so many people who are struggling these days without homes, without enough food, without a whole lot. People that live paycheck to paycheck are becoming a bigger portion of our population. So there's a lot to be done. And Democrats really have to put themselves on the side of, number one, working people, and number two, on the side of people who are struggling economically.
No question. All right, Arlen, this is from the bigpicturereport.com. This is from Robert Reich. And these are the first four. We're going to go through all of them. I didn't give his editorializing, just the headlines, but I wanted you to address them. Any of these four that he lists as the top, I guess, travesties of the Trump administration, do you want to talk about any of them in particular, or all of them, your reaction?
Well, I don't think, he listed 10 altogether, and I don't think he did them in any particular order. These are all things that are really, he's done poorly and badly and messed up in so many ways. So, I mean, they're all important. They're all in their own way. And I don't know if one is more than another.
Did any of his, the commentary by Reich really jump out at you as particularly incisive or particularly pertinent to what we're observing today?
I'll tell you what, I liked how he finished the article. He said, the bottom line, no one is in charge. Trump is holding court, but has the attention span of a fruit fly. This is causing chaos across the federal government as rival sycophants compete for his limited attention. In other words, it's really bad everywhere. So
it's a very, very incompetent group of people doing a lot of harm, and we should be very upset.
We should be, and we are, but the answer is not that easy to come up with, I guess. The Democrats have to do a lot more, and the Republicans really need to not just give everything to Trump that he wants. I mean, they have to. Congress has to, stand up for their institution, for the House of Representatives and the Senate.
Yeah, I'm going to go back. I was going to show the second. The 6, 5 through 10 as opposed to 1 through 4, because I really thought the first 4 that he brought up were less powerful. And maybe you're right, it wasn't in any order, and who knows, maybe you just pulled them out of a hat. But to me, if you're trying to persuade people, lead with your right hook if you can, rather than a jab to the body. But here we go. So let's start with, I just want to go through my thoughts real quick. I don't think Pete Hegseth has been that bad. I don't think he's the worst by any means. I think Marco Rubio has been a much worse Secretary of State than Hegseth has been as a Secretary of Defense. I agree using the signal was a F up big problem. But what do I care? I want us to know what our government is doing. I want us to know what the military is doing. So, if you share it with Jeffrey Goldberg, who's as bad as you are, who's an unrepentant neocon, warmonger, genocider. Okay, I wish you didn't share it with Goldberg, but that's not going to make me fly off the handle. And just to give you like a specific reason why I don't find Hegseth, by the way, let's see, the title of the piece, I'm digressing here, but I want to just be real clear. So and I'll make it so everyone can read it. What he calls it, what Reich calls it, is ineptitude, incompetence, stupidity, and chaos. So, for me, I would start with cruelty, would be, the number one issue I would focus on rather than, cruelty, death, that kind of thing. To me, those are worse even than ineptitude and incompetence. But Reich can go wherever he wants, and this is certainly relevant. I just can't get all worked up about Pete Hegseth. I wasn't going to talk about this, but now I am. Hegseth apparently is one reason we're not at war with Iran. We didn't bomb Iran. And, that's a big deal to me. That's a bigger deal to me than if he's sharing some plans. Now, what is a terrible thing that he did is he supported bombing the Houthis. That's totally wrong. I'm against it. I don't know how strongly he favored that. I know that apparently J.D. Vance was against it. J.D. Vance did not want us to bomb the Houthis. But look at this. Trump waved off Israeli strike after divisions emerged within his administration. And the biggest division, I don't have the quote here, Hegseth, the Secretary of Defense, said, hey, I don't think we should do it. I know Netanyahu wants us to bomb Iran, but I don't think it's a good idea.
I don't know if Hegseth has really said anything, has he, that publicly? I haven't heard anything.
Well, that's what the Times said. The Times flat out said that Hegseth voiced concerns about this particular option, said we shouldn't do it.
Well, I think the important thing with Hegseth is the chaos in the Defense Department. He doesn't know what he's doing. He's trying to do a million things at once and doing them poorly. And people are, very much against. It's in chaos. He's fired leaders. They don't know, who's really in charge, and it's just poorly run, the Defense Department right now. And that's an institution that we really have to, make sure is on track because, it protects us from the rest of the world.
I agree. I agree with that. I don't have a dispute.
No,
Trump's a bad leader, and Hegseth clearly is over his head.
Yeah.
He lists the Harvard debacle. Yeah, I mean, it's all bad. That's all bad stuff. The tariff travesty. I support tariffs, but they're not being implemented in any way a systematic or intelligent fashion. And the attack on the Fed. I mean, this is all just Trump is just he's reactive. He's immature. He's narcissistic. I mean, it's all coming out. We already knew all this.
Yeah, well, that's what Reich is saying. It's just bad everywhere, and if we don't do something about it, the country's just going to be in total chaos and incompetence, and in a lot of more trouble than it is even now.
I want to get into that in greater detail. I just want to go through the rest of the list because I found number 5 to be the worst of the list. This is just absolutely horrific. A man is basically kidnapped. He's disappeared. He's sent to some horrible gulag, who's and almost certainly innocent. It's just terrifying. It is fascism. It's use whatever word you want. It's just absolutely awful. ISIS blunderbuss. I'm with you there too. He's totally empowered this quasi police state type organization. If it's not just police state. The Doge disaster also. It just was a complete, debacle. You stick this guy, this 100-cent billionaire in charge, and they barely find any inefficiency. It's a complete waste and worse. The measles mayhem, all right, so you're full of crap about, immunizations. We know that. Student debt, that's his policy. He believes people should have to pay exorbitant, usurious rates for what should be a human right, education. And yeah, who's in charge? That's all fair. I think number 5 is the worst, so that's why I put it in yellow. Well, my question to you, Arlen, or go ahead, comment, and then I've got another question. I'll give you a lot of time.
Yeah, number 5 is important for one thing because Trump has defined the Supreme Court. The Supreme Court, made a point of saying, make it possible to, send him back. But then Trump is just saying, oh, I can't do that, And so I think there's a defiance of the Supreme Court, and that's pretty big thing. Another thing, with Musk and the Doge, 60 Minutes did a piece this weekend about how Trump and his people and Doge and all that have cut back on health and research and all kinds of things that are absolutely necessary. And it's just a lot. And by the way, that's another issue too. Is 60 Minutes? Did you hear about the producer on 60 Minutes?
Yeah, Scott Pelley did a report on that, and the guy quit. The executive director quit, I believe. Was it the executive director also? Maybe it was a producer. Just said, you are leaning on us not to do stories critical of Trump. I will not work under those conditions. I think that's a very brave, principled stance. I applaud the man who did that.
And he did it publicly, and he'd been with 60 Minutes, I think, the last 30, 40 or more years. I mean, he was a big part of 60 Minutes, and it probably, tore him apart to have to quit. But he made a point of saying why he's quitting, and, it sounds like, the whole staff and everybody are not real happy about this situation. I don't know. I hope they could get him back, but maybe not.
Arlen, I would impeach Trump for the Kilmar Abrego Garcia. You nailed it when you pointed out he's defined the Supreme Court. To me, that rises to a high crime or misdemeanor. He violated the civil rights of this man. Clearly, that's a crime. You can't do that. I would impeach him for that.
Yeah, and many others too have been just, he's broken all the rules and all the laws about, who can leave this country and who could stay and all that. And it's a mess. And there really needs to be something solid and permanent about, what's decided.
Let me ask you something, though, Arlen. We agree on all of this. This is terrible. I don't think those are necessarily the worst things that Trump has done, except for Abrego Garcia. And even that's not as bad as his full-on support for, and it's really bad. But the full-on support for Israel, even worse, at least if you count the bodies. What is Reich, do you think, and I know you can't put yourself in his head, but what is he trying to accomplish by these types of articles?
I think he's just trying to stir people up and get them excited and willing to do something and, to take action, because right now there's not a lot of action being done in defiance of Trump, which is a real shame. And there really should be. So I think that's what he's trying to do. Just get people stirred up and on the streets and in other ways trying to do something about stopping all the horror about that Trump is doing.
Do you think so? You see these as basically a call to action?
Yeah, I think so. That would be. Yeah.
I don't read his pieces very much, and I, to be fair, didn't read the entire piece closely. I didn't see in it, but there may be at the end a call to action. If there isn't, what I would have, if there is one, or if that's the purpose of it, I guess I might have expected, although I'm not saying you're wrong in any way, at least an endorsement, and maybe he has done this, of the AOC Bernie Fight Oligarchy tour and urge people. I mean, I wish I knew what they were calling on people to do. There just isn't a real, and you've lamented this too. There just isn't a clear-cut resistance, and certainly not a plan to resist.
Well, how much opportunity really is there? The Democrats have no power anywhere. So in order to really do something important, they'll have to maybe break a few laws, go to places that they hadn't gone before, and to resist Trump. And I just noticed something interesting about the whole list. Nothing about foreign policy. And I think that's a big one. Ukraine, Russia, I mean, that's very uncertain. Nobody knows, what's going on there, whether Trump is really in favor of whatever Putin's doing, or if he's mad at Putin. It just changes from day to day. And of course, Gaza, that situation is never mentioned. So those are important things that aren't being taken care of.
Yeah, that's why I was a little bit disappointed to a degree with what Reich wrote there. But, he's an important voice and, like I said, articulate and makes some good points. I take issue with some of them. Okay, before we get into this next piece, which I really appreciated you bringing to my attention, Arlen, I hear what you're saying about the Democrats not having power. They don't have a lot of power to resist. They probably have more than they're exercising. But I'm probably sort of just continuing to flog this particular solution in quotes that I propose. But it's like I even said, can you beat something with nothing? Vote for us, even though we don't stand for anything. You want to win. You want to stop Trump. Provide America with a compelling alternative. As bad as Trump is, give us something that we can chew on that will be better. And unless I'm missing it, are you seeing them do that? And don't you think that's what should be their job one?
Well, like I said, they really have no official power to do anything. Trump controls everything, including the courts, really, even if he's defying them. So in order for the Democrats to really do something important and make a difference, they have to kind of go out of their zone of comfort and maybe do something mildly illegal or, disrupt things. Right now, for the longest time, the Democrats have been very mild and very cautious about everything. And now they've got to get out of that, get some new people in there. And you can see they're working on getting new and younger people in there. David Hogg is helping, and a lot of the older Democrats are quitting. And so, hopefully to bring on younger, more powerful people. So, it'll take a while. It's not going to be easy, but the Democrats have to figure out a way to make a big difference, and it's not going to be easy.
All right, Arlen, before we move on to the next story, I think it's Alan Bananov is his name, and I put it up there, but I want to just go back to Reich for one more second, and it's not because I have anything to add, but I'm just wondering if you do, because kind of zoomed through there, and this was your piece you've got featured at a BPR. So anything else that you feel maybe we missed from his column there?
I'm sure he could put a lot more, but he's got limited space, and he got some really important issues on there, and I'm sure he can think of more, but he can't do it all in one article, I guess.
All right, let's get to the second. Now, you recommended this article as well, and I'm very glad you did. It's a bit, it isn't today's or yesterday's news, but it's close. It's just a little over a week old now. And it's a kind of an evergreen. It's not like, there was a fire yesterday. I mean, it's relevant to today. So, before I go, and I took some quotes from it or sections, but I want to know why you wanted to talk about this. What jumps out at you about this article?
Well, I think everybody is in agreement that our country, the world for that matter, is in a mess. We got a lot of big things that we have to do, and a lot of people have different reasons for it. His particular reason, and maybe it's a little bit different, is the deeper force underlying today's disarray, he says, is economic stagnation. And he gives some ideas on what to do about that. And they make sense to me. So, I think he's just taking a slightly different position than other people, and he makes some good points of view.
Yeah, I'm going to put that up in a second, Earl. And I saw that statement about economic stagnation. And in fact, I highlighted it. And when I read that, I thought, I'm not sure I'm going to agree with this guy. But the more I read, the more I did, because he says it's economic stagnation, but he concludes that the problem, as I see it, he isn't saying it's really a stagnant economies. It's inequality. It's the fact that in a slow growing world, economically, almost all the wealth and resources are going to a tiny handful of people. And that's what's causing the disarray, the instabilities. I agree with that. As you may know, one of the mottos, or I don't know what the right word is, cliche. It's not a cliche. One of our, it's not a logo either. I don't know, whatever the word is, where you have a little tagline is, we need a world where everyone has enough and no one has too much. And I think he's making that point.
Yeah, he closed his article with two plausible ways to respond to this kind of economic stagnation. And the first one was for countries to spend more, making use of deficits. Everybody talks about, the deficit's so high, we got to cut. That's what Trump and the MAGA people are doing, but it's not helping. It's not making things better. And he's saying, there's been a lot of progress and a lot of things done just because of spending a little more money than we have. So that certainly makes sense. And the second thing he talks about is redistribution, what you just talked about. There's the rich are getting richer, the rest of us are getting poorer, and that can't keep going on. That's just going to be a recipe for disaster.
Right, of course. And I think what is often not mentioned by economists, and he doesn't mention, at least if he did, I didn't see it. And I think it's a huge failure on the part of economists, not on the failure of the science economics, because I think this clearly is subsumed within economics, but so few economists discuss the climate catastrophe. And I think it's absolutely part. I mean, it's a value. It's a good. It's something that we all rely on to survive. And when we talk about unlimited growth, he's saying, hey, we don't have growth, or we have stagnation, whatever. So we can try to grow by tax cuts which don't work, or by deficit spending. But what he doesn't point out is that there's an enormous price. Even if we are able to grow economies more, which we probably can, the cost to the planet, the cost to our children's future is incalculable. He doesn't say that. I wish he did.
Yeah, the climate is, of course, one of the big issues that people are not, at least this administration is not thinking about or working on. And in fact, they still call it a hoax, and there's really nothing to it. And but there is, and our planet is in danger, and it's already been losing a lot of species, a lot of the weather is becoming a nightmare, the change in weather and everything. So yeah, that's a big one, and it has to be addressed at some point. And so far, it hasn't been.
Well, the parties don't want to talk about the climate catastrophe because this evident solution means that there's less for everybody. Yeah. And if there's going to be less for everybody, then again, we have to redistribute down. We have to say to the people with 5 houses and 20 cars, you just don't get to have all that. But both parties are captured by the billionaire class, and so they won't say that.
Well, that's one way the Democrats could make a difference, kind of separate themselves from Trump and the MAGA people is by, talking about that there's too many billionaires, the inequality is growing at a too fast a pace, and, it has to be controlled. It won't be easy, but if they could get that into their message, I think it'll help.
Why do you think they don't?
Well, because those people have a lot of power. They have a lot of money. And the way our election system works is that they can donate as much money as they want, as, Elon Musk, $270 million to help Trump get elected. So the Democrats don't want to lose that money, but they can't offend the very rich too much, but they need to talk about it and, come up with some ideas that are at least make the situation better.
Do you think there's outright corruption involved? I mean, I obviously think there is. I mean, do you think that there's this calculation going on in the minds of many Democrats, which is, hey, if I carry water for the for-profit healthcare industry, if I don't sponsor Medicare for all, if I support Arms for Israel, and even if I lose this job, even if I get voted out, I can get a really cushy, super high-paying job as a lobbyist for military contractors, for for-profit healthcare, for the oil companies. Isn't that part of this?
Well, there's no question that I think that it's important for the Democrats to separate themselves a little bit more from the upper classes, the elites, the billionaires, and I think my hope is that they will, by getting younger candidates in office. Younger people have some new ideas, because the old ideas obviously didn't work for the last election, and they don't sound very promising right now until the Democrats come up with a way to really, really make a difference. And that's never going to be easy.
All right, Arlen, I've gone through the 2 stories. I didn't have as much time to prep as I usually do because I was down on Capitol Hill. I took a little video, but not much. But I do want to at least use our full hour. I hate to cut you off. It's great to talk to you. So I'm just sort of to shoot the stuff around a little bit. I know you view my solution, if you will, of embracing building an alternative, of building a third party as pie in the sky to a degree. But let me ask you this then. Where have you seen successes? I know you're seeing what you hope is a little bit of a resurgence of progressivism, of populism in the Democratic Party. Over the course of your lifetime, we've seen some political wins. We've seen some successes. How do you kind of think maybe, and I know this is our normal topic, so I'm not phrasing it well, but I guess even like on the localist level, how do we replicate that?
Yeah, I mean, so basically you're saying, what can we do about this horrible situation we're in? And there has to be something more drastic than what we're doing right now. And I don't know what that is. And then, like I said many times, Hal, our political system is so broken, so dysfunctional. The fact that the Supreme Court, that's another problem, has allowed, people with money to do whatever they want with their money, to donate as much money as they want, sometimes without having even to disclose, who's giving the money. And when under those circumstances, with the kind of political system we have, the election system that we have, it's causing a lot of problems and making answers more difficult.
You're watching Halitics. We got Arlen on. The phone number here, 240-242-5646. If you want to join us in the last waning moments of today's program, 240-242-5646. But I think people should understand that there's just so much anger, so much disappointment. And I have less than probably most, but you see it in the reaction of a majority of Americans, I think, Arlen, who view, for example, Luigi Mangione as a hero, who absolutely want him to be acquitted.
Yeah, that's certainly a symptom of some of the problems that we have. People are just desperate for something different and for somebody to do something out of the ordinary.
Yeah, I wish I had something else to say. I don't, and it's disappointing. I do think I'm not somebody who says, "Oh, you should get out and organize," because I don't think we should have to organize. I think but we do need to vote, and unfortunately, we haven't had the options I think we need. Let me show you this just to kind of get a sense of what I'm talking about with regard to Luigi Mangione. At least this is regarding folks 18. It's pretty amazing, right? I mean, this is a guy who, although I think there's some question if he really did it, but YouGov poll has Mangione at +9 among 18 to 29-year-olds, whereas the company whose CEO he killed was unfavorable, or at least is alleged to have killed, is viewed much more unfavorably. Well, I mean, I'm not surprised. This is what we face, is a angry society in true disarray, and Trump's administration mirrors that. But unless we have, I had said, I guess, some sort of a hotshot, some sort of a hero to step up and really change things, in the FDR model.
Yeah, we really need that kind of a person, the FDR type of person, and Democrats haven't found that person yet. I think Cory Booker is making himself more, out there, more popular and doing things a little bit differently. So you got to give him some credit, and I'm sure there'll be others that will come up. But as far as the Mangione thing, I think the reason that he's kind of popular in a lot of ways is because we know there's a problem and nobody else is fixing it. Our government, our politicians are not fixing the healthcare system that we have that is depriving people of, lives and money and everything else. So, maybe they think, well, the only thing left is just to kill the ones who are in charge, not a good point of view, but understandable.
Well, when you think of the times in the history when that's happened, such as the French Revolution and the Russian Revolution, the results have often been very bad for working people. It's not like, I guess in the end, the French Revolution did lead to a fairer, better France, but certainly the Russian Revolution did not.
Well, this country started out with a lot of hope and sense of that we have to have, democracy in this world. And now it's kind of slipping back, I think, toward more, capitalism and money and, wealth and profit are just more important than anything else. And that's not going to do it. People are now in a lot of trouble economically and they're, they're just upset about everything that's going on. And there's no one answer out there at this moment, and not one person out there at this moment. And so we just have to wait and see what's going to happen. I wish it was easier than that, but it isn't.
So what you're saying, Arlen, is, if you don't mind my speaking, whatever the word is, speaking for you or putting words in your mouth, at least right now, the answer is unclear whether we can stanch the wounds.
Yeah, I think that's the answer right now. We don't know. We don't know, and we haven't found the way yet.
All right. Anything else before we call it a day?
No, I think we covered, the ground. I think, there's people are starting to recognize that this administration can't do what they said they were going to do, and they're looking around for some other way to do it. And so, will that other way come out? We'll just have to wait and see.
All right, Arlen, thank you so much. Always great to see you. And folks, I will be back tomorrow. We'll have Arlen in 1 week. 1 week from today, Tuesday.
Thank you, Al.